Ever wondered about the struggle of a single father? Our protagonist, Inuzuka, lives that life with his little daughter, Suji, who is obsessed with food. A typical day begins with him preparing a pre-cooked meal for Suji in the morning, before school, while she watches her favorite cartoon, Magic Girl. He notices that he made the same meal as the day before, which makes him feel sad. After getting her ready for school, they both say goodbye to a picture of his late wife. Inuzuka then drops Suji at daycare and heads to work, where it's revealed that he is an assistant teacher at a high school. Since his wife passed away 6 months ago, Inuzuka hasn't been the same. This is evident when he refuses to attend the belated welcoming party, as he needs to take care of Suji. Despite his colleagues trying to convince him to join, he declines, always thinking about his daughter. They ask him if he cooks for himself, to which he replies that he only tried once, and Suji, humorously, turned into a goblin after tasting it, though not literally. After returning home, Inuzuka works on some school tasks while Suji watches TV and notices that cherry blossom season has finally arrived. The next day, he tells Suji that they're going to see the cherry blossoms, making her ecstatic. They clean the house together, with Suji being cute while Inuzuka does the actual work, and get ready for the outing. At the park, they see a lot of people, so Inuzuka, being a responsible father, lifts Suji onto his shoulders as they explore the park. While walking, Suji notices a woman sitting under a tree, crying and eating rice cakes. Suji runs to her and asks if she's okay. The woman explains she's not crying because she's alone, but because the food is so delicious. She had been waiting for her mother, who canceled on her, which made her upset. Being a foodie, Suji asks if the rice cakes were yummy, to which the woman replies they were super yummy. Suji, disappointed there were no more rice cakes left, perks up when the woman hands Inuzuka a business card for her mother's restaurant. On their way home, they stop at a bento shop. Suji shows reluctance about the boxed meals, so Inuzuka asks if she'd prefer eating at a restaurant. They end up buying the bento and having it for dinner. Inuzuka notices Suji isn't thrilled, but she cheers up when they play together. The next day, Inuzuka arrives home late from work with the usual bento for dinner. Entering the living room, he finds Suji fixated on a cooking program. She asks if he can write to her mother to make her some meat, and wonders if it will taste as good as the food on TV. This moment breaks Inuzuka, and he drops the bento. He rushes outside with Suji on his back, calling the number on the business card. The woman from the park, Megumi, answers. He tells her they're coming to the restaurant immediately, as he wants Suji to eat good food. Though reluctant, Megumi agrees and gives directions to the restaurant. After navigating some shady alleys while singing Suji's favorite show's theme song, they find the restaurant. Megumi greets them but delivers bad news. The restaurant is closed because her mother isn't there. Suji, disappointed, asks if she won't be having any yummy food. Seeing this, Megumi tells them to stay and that she'll make some pot rice for Suji. This excites Suji, who sits eagerly and looks around the restaurant. Megumi begins preparing the food, washing the rice grains, but suddenly excuses herself to the back of the restaurant. Meanwhile, Inuzuka heads to the washroom and overhears Megumi sounding panicked. He peeks through the door and finds her calling her mother for instructions on how to make the rice, as she had no idea what she was doing, not even knowing how much water to use. She returns to the kitchen and somehow manages to follow her mother's instructions. Back at the table, Suji notices the worried expression on her father's face. Inuzuka is clearly concerned about the outcome of the meal, but he keeps it to himself. Megumi returns and adds sake to the pot, which worries Inuzuka, but she reassures him that the alcohol will burn off during cooking. It's then that Inuzuka realizes that Megumi is a student at his school, not just the woman from the park. Her real name is Kotori, and she's from Class 1A. As they wait for the food, Inuzuka reminisces about his late wife, who used to cook for them with love. When the rice is finally ready, Kotori excitedly plates it. It's perfectly cooked, her biggest accomplishment yet, and everyone enjoys the meal. Inuzuka gets emotional seeing how happy Suji is and tastes the rice, finding it worth the hype. He promises Suji that he'll try his best to cook good food for her every day from now on. Seeing this, Kotori shyly asks Inuzuka an unexpected question. if he would like to make dinner with her and eat together. Inuzuka is surprised and finds the request odd. He explains that her parents might find it strange if she's cooking for another family. Tsuji, understanding this, becomes excited at the prospect of trying the food again. They attempt to convince Inuzuka with cute faces, but he still hesitates. The next day, as promised, Inuzuka puts effort into his cooking, preparing an okay-looking breakfast that Tsuji enjoys. She enthusiastically remarks that she can taste the ingredients, which is a compliment in his eyes. He then lays down a few packaged food items on the desk and asks her which one she would like for lunch, not quite grasping the difference between fresh and frozen food. Regardless, he's trying. He even cooks some wieners and rice. Tsuji asks whether Kotori helped him, prompting Inuzuka to recall a conversation with her. Kotori had explained that the restaurant where they had eaten might close for good soon because her mother is rarely at the shop. She further tells him that it would be nice if the restaurant's lights turned on more frequently by them cooking there and having dinner together. Back in the present, Inuzuka is at school teaching when he notices Kotori. He tries to learn more about her and finds out that her parents divorced when she was in 3rd grade, and her mother runs a cooking TV show in a restaurant, which he already knew since they had visited the day before. He asks the principal whether it would be a good idea to visit her place and discuss her proposition. He explains that although it is rare for teachers to meet students outside of school, it used to be quite common during his own school days. He recalls how teachers would even have food over at their homes back then. When Inuzuka returns home, he finds that Tsuji has done a little drawing. In the drawing, he sees 3 people: himself, Tsuji, and another girl. She tells him it's Kotori, and he then asks her if she would like to visit Kotori's place. Tsuji clearly loves the idea and rants about it to him, leading him to realize he should make it happen. The next day at school, Inuzuka finds Kotori hiding in a sneaky spot while enjoying a snack. He tells her he has considered her proposal to cook together and expresses his desire to meet her mother to discuss it. Kotori informs him that her mother will be free that night and suggests bringing Tsuji along so they can eat at their place. She then asks him what kind of food Tsuji likes, and they set up a plan to meet later after school. After school, they head over to the restaurant, where they find Kotori kneeling at the doorstep. She explains that something has come up, and her mother had to leave, showing proof of a letter. Just as they are about to leave, she pleads with Inuzuka to stay for dinner. Initially, he tells her he shouldn't, but Tsuji gets excited at the mention of dinner and rushes off to put on one of Kotori's old aprons. Inuzuka has no choice but to stay and have dinner with Kotori. As they prepare to start cooking, Kotori reveals that her mother wrote down a recipe for what they are to make. Inuzuka finds it amusing since the recipe resembles a picture book. She explains that she told her mother there would be a child present, so her mother made it interactive. He realizes that the recipe includes several types of food and suggests they just stick to making the soup and Hamburg steak. Kotori agrees, and they decide to begin with the pork soup. Kotori hands Inuzuka the task of cutting the vegetables while she works on the rice. As Inuzuka begins chopping the veggies, he realizes he is quite slow and not doing very well. He informs Kotori that they won't finish in time if he continues cutting, and she should help. It is then revealed that Kotori is actually afraid of kitchen knives, which is ironic since her mother is a skilled chef. When Inuzuka questions her about wanting to cook together, she reluctantly admits that she needed someone to cut the vegetables. Regardless of this hiccup, they move forward and get back to cooking. Inuzuka shares that cooking together is beneficial for him, as he has doubts about whether he can prepare good meals for Tsuji on his own. He appreciates that they are helping each other with their arrangement. The cooking continues as they chop the veggies and create a menu, which is whimsically done by little Picasso Tsuji, who includes squid on the menu, even though there's absolutely no squid available. Once Inuzuka finishes his part, he hands over the flavor testing to Kotori, who ensures everything is seasoned just right. By the time they finish with the soup, Tsuji is very hungry, so they decide to set aside their initial plans to eat later. After tasting the soup, Tsuji expresses her delight which makes Inuzuka blush with happiness. Once they complete the food and prepare to head home, Tsuji eagerly anticipates their next cooking adventure. Kotori, worried about what Inuzuka will say, is relieved when he agrees to come again since preparing food at the restaurant makes Tsuji happy. He mentions that he will set some ground rules for their future cooking sessions. The following day, Kotori wakes up early and finds a note from her mother alongside a freshly prepared meal. The note states that her mother is out for a bit as she has gone to a cooking program on TV and encourages Kotori to watch it. After getting ready, Kotori turns on her phone to watch the broadcast and sees her mother in a sailor uniform acting like a high schooler. Back at Inuzuka's place, Tsuji is preparing for preschool while Inuzuka makes her breakfast and lunch. This time, he accidentally burns the scrambled eggs, but manages to whip up a decent miso soup that his daughter enjoys. After she cleans up her utensils, Inuzuka and Tsuji head to school with a sense of accomplishment. At school, Inuzuka hangs out with Kotori, who complains about her mother's outfit choice from the morning program. Asks him whether he is scared of undercooking food. He explains that he, in fact, was, as Subi has a real hard time when she gets a stomachache. Speaking of Tsuji, who at her preschool was making a hamburger with clay, she ends up getting in trouble as she has a little bit of a quarrel with the preschool bully. Inuzuka, who was at work, was informed about this, and he pulls up to pick her up. As he goes into the daycare, he finds her giving a very girly pop attitude to the boy, as she refuses to apologize to him. He ends up having to carry her out of the place, and she only opens up after they finally make it home. After he asks her what happened, she explains that she had felt really bad after the guy had called her a thief, as she had only taken the clay since her friends had offered it to her. Inuzuka tells her that she was not a thief, but rather it was just a misunderstanding, and that she shouldn't worry about it as they can buy all her friends' clay and make up for it. Regardless of all of this, Sui is still down. As they head over to the restaurant for Hamburger Day, Inuzuka and Kotori are hoping that by the time they are done with the cooking, Sumu will feel better. As they set off on the cooking, as always, Inuzuka is tasked with the cutting of the vegetables, and this time they are onions. Now, speaking from experience, onions are the worst vegetable to cut. I literally cry every time, but luckily Inuzuka uses protection, unlike me. Of course, I meant protection when cutting onions. Anyways, as they keep on cooking, they can't help but notice that Sunvi is still gloomy, so Inuzuka asks her what he can do to make her feel better. After listening closely and making up with her, the gang is finally back in high spirits as they get to shaping up the meat patty. After topping up the food with homemade sauce and an egg, it was finally done, and everyone damn well enjoyed it. Tsuji then reveals that she had got the clay so she could make her father a birthday present, and that was a clay hamburger. Of course, that's when Inuzuka realizes that it was his birthday, as it was just a minute past midnight. Kotori, not knowing what to do, offers him her egg, but he rejects it and says that he was good. She promises to make something better than what they had made as a treat for his birthday. The next day at work, one of the other teachers working with Inuzuka gives him a package full of vegetables which were said to be from his village. He was apparently distributing them among all his colleagues. After school, once they reach home, another package had arrived, this one being from Inuzuka's mother. They open up the package to find even more vegetables. Tsuji, who hates veggies as most kids her age, looks through the whole box searching for meat. Inuzuka sees this and decides he will make a meat and veggie mixed dinner, which turns out good in his opinion, but it wasn't as good for Tsumugi, who ends up crying after eating the veggies at night. The next day, all he could think of was what he was going to do about this situation. He talks with Kotori and tries to come up with a solution for this, but the two of them can't relate as neither of them were picky eaters. That's when Kotori suggests that they can make something delicious with the veggies that Tsuji might actually like, and that she would ask her mother about a recipe for it. Inuzuka agrees and plans to meet with her later that day at the restaurant. While at school, she thinks about what she can do and even asks her friend about what she could do to make food that can get kids to eat lots of veggies. Meanwhile, Inuzuka also tries to get the view of some of the mothers from the preschool kids, but all he gets is that different families have different views on it. As night falls, it was time for the cooking to begin, and Kotori reveals that she is making gratin. Well, what Suji didn't know was that they would be cutting the veggies into tiny bits and hiding them in bechamel sauce to cover the veggies with. They start by washing all the veggies, and as a way to get Suji to stay interested, he asks her to wash the vegetables for him. All is going well until she sees a bell pepper. Aori comes in clutch and saves the game by showing that the bell pepper could be used like a cup. Once they were done with getting the vegetables cut into tiny bits, they work on the bechamel sauce, which had to be done just right so that it wouldn't get clumped up. Inuzuka, using his 200 IQ parenting skills, tells Suji to use a spell to help stop the clumping, which keeps her interest in the whole veggie-based dinner they were going to have. After finally making the sauce, it was time to add it onto the filling, and Suji is excited. Kotori, who had heard from Inuzuka earlier that day that Suji likes cherry tomatoes, comes in clutch and asks her to place the tomatoes on top. After this, they finally baked the food up, and it had baked perfectly. The taste was just as great, as even Suji, who loathes vegetables, ends up liking it. Well, everything except that bell pepper, which she skillfully manages to feed her father in the cover of the bechamel sauce. His own idea had come back to bite him, but what mattered was that Suji enjoyed the food, and Inuzuka couldn't have been happier. Kotori and her friend had gone to see a movie, and on their way back, she suddenly had some cravings for donuts. This was on her mind as she got off the station and was walking when she ran into Tsumugi, who was walking with a blonde-haired man. She obviously was worried, so she decided to follow them and stalk the man to not let anything happen to Tsumugi. As she kept spying, the man, who had just given her an ice cream, was about to hand a cigarette to her, and that was when she blew her cover as she stopped them. Just about then, Inuzuka comes there and thanks the mystery man for keeping her company. Turns out this was one of his high school friends, and the cigarette was just chocolate. The two of them catch up while Kotori and Suji play. That's when she gives the idea of making donuts to her. Meanwhile, Yaji, the blonde guy, keeps on messing around with his high school friend. All of a sudden, the two are approached by Kotori, who says that they should make donuts. Inuzuka is a bit confused, and that's when Yaji spills the fact that Suji resists eating donuts, although she likes to try them. So, Inuzuka, without a second thought, agrees to make donuts. As they head home the next day, Inuzuka arrives early at Mum's restaurant, and Kotori had already prepared all the ingredients necessary for the food preparation. They start the process, and it all goes smoothly, as Tsumugi also gets involved with the cooking and helps out. After they were done with the dough, they would have to wait for a while. So this leaves a chance for Inuzuka and Suji to go to the nearby arcade and have some father and daughter bonding.